Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:45 on September 30th, 2020. We're here for LCEA and Lake County Schools bargaining. We'll start off with roll call for the district. I'm Chad Farnsworth.
Jamie Sidoric.
Jake Stein.
Julie Llewellyn.
Michelle Hoppenstad.
Is that everybody?
I think that's everybody.
Okay, LCEA, Kathy Smith.
Stuart Klatt, LCEA.
Amy Gordon, LCEA.
Tony Beckett, LCEA.
Tracy Wood, LCEA.
Melissa Newman, LCEA.
Nicole Roll, LCEA.
Liz Schlatter, LCEA.
All right, is that everybody?
I believe so.
Okay. Have a light agenda, but I know you guys have some things you want to discuss. I'll share my screen briefly. Give me 1 second here. As we're currently exist, just wanted to give an update on where we're at with our progress on the teacher salary allocation. Why is my screen not stretching? Hang on 1 second, guys. A little technical difficulty here. There we go. Happy that we were able to sign our MOU since our last meeting, and it was board approved on Monday. We've worked with you guys as your plans have been put together to take the MOU out for vote for ratification on you guys' end. Hopefully that goes well. We'll look forward to that next week. I've received, I think, the last of the charter plans today. Got a few questions to answer for them this afternoon and in the morning, but we will be submitting those on the October 1st deadline tomorrow to DOE. So hopefully we can continue to move forward. At the district level, we've got people already working in the background just to try and expedite things, presuming that it gets ratified. At least we'll have some of the work and plans put together, and then as soon as DOE releases the funds to us, we'll be able to begin distributing those. So that's my update on that. Do you guys have anything as far as the process that you'd like to add to that, Stuart, Kathy?
Just that we've put together plans on how to do a ratification vote. Kathy, do you have anything you want to add or go through?
No, unless, I can say that the email went out to our reps and the vote should take place next Wednesday. And you had sent out an email to the administrators. And so we were working together and trying to get this vote to happen as soon as we could anyway, which is not our normal way of doing the voting. So it definitely helped to work together to get this one accomplished.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your help with that, Kathy. So that's pretty much our update on that situation. Then, currently we still have an open contract for 1920, so that's kind of where our starting point is here today. You guys had made proposal whenever we back before all of our sessions on reopening. So I had some counter proposal to some of that language. So it's up to you guys where we look at, if you want to have some discussion about what your thoughts are moving forward. Before we dive into discussions.
Okay. I mean, the bottom line is, what are we going to do to make this contract work?
Okay. Well, we'd exchanged some language back and forth. Our last discussions were centered around some of that language in Article 10. Let me pull up what I have. Okay. So basically, you know, we had done some work back and forth and been exchanging chunks of language that basically were in some of where we had pulled language out of where the Joint Leadership Committee, which was called Leadership Team, which we redefined it, and as we negotiated through this, and the idea was to pull all those responsibilities out and put them in their own section so it will be clear. So in the proposed section that I sent to you guys, I have your responses in here. So I'd like to go through and just tell my thoughts on those and our position. You guys have put, if committee meetings take place during contract hours, that a coverage plan will be adopted if necessary to make sure that if those were occurring during contract hours, that their classes were covered. And the LCEA representative will be compensated at their hourly rate of pay for committee meetings attended outside of teacher contract time. That's something that I think is fully reasonable and we're agreeable to. So that piece was your language. On the extra student supervision, you guys have proposed on the end of it that the scheduled duties will last no longer than is equitable based on requirements of the school and will include all certified staff to ensure equitability. Basically, I think what in my mind is it seems that as we're putting restrictions on how that plan looks, that's, you know, defeating the purpose of having a team that works together to put together a plan that's equitable on the campus. So I understand what you're saying is you want as many people included as possible in the plan, but there's also people in those mornings and afternoons that are part of you guys' group, like a guidance counselor, that could be fielding people and families on a regular basis in the mornings and dealing with things that prevent them from being able to perform some duties. So I just don't, I hate to put in restrictive language when the intent of the section originally was to provide some flexibility at the school and some teacher voice and coming up with the plan altogether. You guys have any thoughts on that?
If anybody has any comments, go ahead. I'll wait until we go through.
My only comment is the fact of, yes, we're just trying to make it as equitable as possible, because some people can't say this year because we don't really see, and things are different this year anyway.
Yeah.
But in the past, we've seen like some people that maybe have 2 weeks of duty and then someone else may have 6 weeks of duty or whatever. Just something like that. So yes, just trying to make it as equitable as possible for everybody.
And we've also heard that certain people, specials teachers or people with first period or last period plan had duties all year. And that doesn't seems like they're being punished for having a first period or last period plan, or because they happen to teach a specials area.
Well, and I think we handle some of that in the language that talks about the duties lasting no longer than is equitable based on the requirements of the school. And I think that's something where if you feel like somebody's being abused on their duty, I mean, that's when they need to have a conversation with their administrator or their building rep to work through them to try and work out that issue. And if it means pulling back together this committee to re-examine the inequities there, then that needs to happen. I don't think we're going to solve a case-by-case basis. You know, I think that's going to happen regardless of what's in this contract likely. So I think we need to, when those case-by-case issues come up, then we need to handle them. And administrators need to make sure that there's no reason somebody should be sitting on duty all year long in that regard. Want me to scroll down to some other areas?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. The emergency procedures, you guys added, if a teacher has extra students in their classroom due to dividing up the teacher's classroom, said teacher will be compensated for 2 planning periods. That's something that we've attempted to address in Article 10, Section 20, that you'll see a little bit later. And you guys have made some proposal for counter proposal for how people would be provided flexible time. So that conversation, we can pick that up in a few minutes when we get to that section, because I have further counter with that. It's not just striking this language. The start and end times, I was a little confused with this. If any of these extra duty time is beyond teacher's contractual time, the teacher will be compensated at their hourly rate of pay. I don't think this is just talking about the overall start and end times of school. So when they're saying reporting for duty, I think they mean basically reporting for their work overall. So do you guys want to talk about that a little more and what your intent there was?
Well, I do know that, say, morning duties in some schools, you have to report before your regular contract time. Or if you're doing bus duty at the end of the day or parking lot duty at the end of the day, the duty times extend beyond your contract time hours. So,
are those people that are receiving supplements for that? Because there's extra
Nope.
duty supervision.
There are some who
supplements.
do, but then there are many who don't, because it's part of their assigned duties, equitable, whatever.
Principals, do you guys have any input on that?
So I mean, I can only speak for obviously here. We have supplements for those teachers who are car duty and bus duty. I do know maybe the only time would be maybe the first week of school when everybody has an understanding that the buses run really late, but other than that, it hasn't been an issue for us here. So I can't help you on that one, Chad. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I do pay supplements out for those teachers.
Yeah, I know we do have, and we've gone back through to make sure that the schools are taking advantage of those supplements for teachers. What Stuart, do you guys feel like this is at what level do you feel like you're seeing that the most at?
We're seeing it at elementary school level, where teachers have to stay in their room until a student is dismissed for bus. And sometimes that can be 20, 30, 40 minutes beyond contract time, or if it happens to be inclement weather, it could even be longer. And I know in high schools, yes, there are some people who are getting the supplements for the extra duties. There are others who just part of their regular route. This is your 2-week duty or 9-week duty or whatever. You have to be at bus duty from 6:45, even though your report time may not be till 7:05, or so they're extended time periods. But it's the elementary where we're seeing it predominantly, mainly at dismissal.
So it's in the afternoons, you feel like, where this is coming
Now,
into
some
play.
principals are good about taking the students into a common area. There are others who say that the student has to stay in the classroom or in a classroom until they're actually called and dismissed, whether it be for their car ride or their bus. And so in some cases that may be 20 to 40 minutes after regular dismissal time. So it's an issue.
How many teachers do you think you're talking about, or not teachers, schools, do you think that are having these issues?
Yeah, that was going to be my question, Mr. Farnsworth, because, that's kind of news to especially folks like me, where we never have an issue of that magnitude. And I'm sure, Mr. Clatt, you can speak to that.
I'd like to.
This year might be different, but I know that we have heard in the past, I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of 3 schools for sure.
Okay.
And there may be others, but I can think of 3 for sure that kept saying that, no, our dismissal is, the kids stay in the room and then they dismiss each bus because they don't have enough room, like outside, to have, 10 buses, let's say, whatever.
Or they're
To
using
have all the kids out
area.
there. So therefore, it's, safety, and we got to keep them, in the classroom and whatever. This year, I'm sure it's more just because of the situations right now, unfortunately. And that's right now, before and after school now, because the elementary teachers are missing out on a lot of, I guess I would call extra plan time, let's say, because they used to have, 15 to 20 minutes, let's say, in the morning, and the same amount maybe in the afternoon when the kids were gone, that they could, grab something or use the restroom or, print something, whatever they needed last minute, especially in the morning type idea. And now, they're being asked that, well, no, now you have to be at your room by 8 o'clock because kids are coming to you at 8 o'clock. Well, that's when school starts, supposedly, and your contract is at 8 o'clock, which means if they need to do anything beforehand or afterwards, they're doing it on their own time. Same thing with if any secondary school, if they're supposed to, sign paperwork or do anything that they're doing, they may be asked to come in, before the contract time just to, to do something, or stay afterwards to do something. But that's where this was coming from. I understand what you're saying, Chad, that it's supposed to be for, in this case, the leadership issues of the start time is at, 8 o'clock versus 8:15.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's no place for what you guys are, to address what you guys are concerned with there. I'm just not sure this is the spot. You know what I mean? I think this is a more global section of, okay, this is what the daggum school schedule is. You know what I mean? So I would like to do a little bit of research on with the principals and see You know, because I think more along the lines of, I think probably you guys just want the time to not be infringed upon, you know, not necessarily, you know, hunting for money around every corner. It's just, look, you know, their time's needs to be valued. So, because to me, it seems like if you've got those before and after school supplements available, you know, how do you work that out and arrange that somehow to where you've got a system in place where when the issues do arise that are unavoidable. So,
Right. And I realize even with the elementary, sometimes they'll put like all car raters out at one time. Well, then they still hold on, the teachers have to hold on to the, you know, to the bus kids. You know, and like right now, especially, yeah, they may have them in each room, but in the past, it also happened that way, that, you know, and that's where Stuart was coming from, saying that at the end of the day that, you know, if their contract's done at 3:30, you know, well, you know, C bus, blue bus, whatever, you know, they're not here till 3:45. Well, then I have the kid in my room for an extra 15 minutes type idea. So, and some buses are always late because that's just the nature of what happens. You know, this year may be different, of course, because we don't have as many students right now riding buses, but eventually it does come back and eventually it will get to be the same as it was in the past.
Gotcha.
And I know the common areas where they would have students congregate are being used for ELCs and other activities. So that's not always available for the AP or the dean to hold students in that location. So hence they're saying they have to stay in the classroom.
I got you. I've got some ideas, and I think we can work with some principals too on providing some relief in those areas, and we'll see what it looks like from a language standpoint. Let me do a little research on that.
And let me just say, since Stuart brought it up, something about the ELC programs and things like that, it depends on the program itself, but like, even if, for example, they're in the cafeteria, well, could they go out first and do something outside, you know, barring weather, but could they go out and do something first before they utilize the cafeteria so that the cafeteria might be able to be used for, you know, 2 buses that are always late or whatever. I mean, just trying to put something out there.
I saw Darina just popped in, so I'm gonna put her on the spot a little bit too, because I always see her out. She's a hardcore bus duty. I've seen her out there separating parents at some point this year on the road. She's probably doing the job of Tavares PD at some point. Dorinda, as far as buses being on time in the afternoons, do you have some that have been straggling that you wind up with having to hold kids? Have you experienced that at all? Dorinda, can you hear me? She might not be fully on yet. Dorinda, you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. We're talking about situations where kids might have to be supervised by teachers outside of contract hours at the end of the day. Are you guys having any experience with transportation where you've got consistent issues?
No, all of our students are off campus by 3:15 for buses.
Okay.
It's not going to be an issue. I mean, if you're just paying attention to what the transportation is, you have all your high schools out an hour and their planning is at the end of the day. So therefore, there's not going to be late buses to elementary school to pick them up because they have an additional hour to get to wherever they need to go and get there. So this is a unique year in comparison to years past.
Okay, that makes sense, Liz. So in previous years, what have you guys seen?
Right.
Have you guys seen anything different, Jeff or Dorinda or anybody?
In recent years, yes, we have had an issue with transportation getting late. Last year it was 3:30, 3:35. Of course, we would release all the students and have administrators watch the students. But yeah, we had a lot more problems last year with that situation where late buses arrive and changing of buses quite a bit. But we have had none of that this year. Probably, like Liz said, because they have so much time after the high school's dismissed.
Correct.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we got some valid concerns there. So I'll, let me do a little more research on that and talk to some more principals that are not with us and see, what kind of plans they have in place for handling those types of things. The next section was on planning period, and we talked about making recommendations to ensure equitable maximal instructional time and planning period for every teacher. This includes master schedule. We're opposed to getting in the business of totally discussing master schedule with all interested parties. It's a daunting enough task, and it's built over time. It's not like that's something that can be covered in a meeting or two. That's something that goes on really for the sake of most of the year. So as far as the master schedule goes, that's not something that we're willing to involve. I mean, I think we have to do our due diligence on our end as we're building those master schedules and as principals are building those. But at the end of the day, everybody's not going to be happy. And as far as when you're looking for equitable in a master schedule, it's not necessary. There's so many demands on a master schedule. I don't think equity is the focus when you're building a master schedule. I think, yeah, you look at what works out best where you're not overburdening anyone. But I think some of your tenured teachers, that have been here the longest might agree with you that, they might like how some of their master schedules look based on the amount of experience they have and working in certain areas and the preps that they teach. So master schedule, I would like to leave in the hands of our principals and working with their administrators and whatever district level inputs we give for them to help, make sure it's done right.
I think it might not go in this area, but I think where some of the problem, at least in the high school, when you're starting to talk about equitable planning time, I have two teachers last year that they didn't have any planning period for almost 2 weeks. And it was right before FTE. And it was because they were trying to get everybody who was ELL or ESC getting all that paperwork done. And so, when you're having your math and your ELA teachers, there's never equitable anything with them in comparison to your others, because that's where they collect the data. They're the ones that usually go to those meetings. So maybe not in this area, but I do think that needs to be addressed, because that is eating up a lot of the planning period, which ultimately that impacts their ability to plan for other students who may not be those ESE or ELL students.
Yeah, and that's, I think from just the overall equity of the planning periods and what it looks like, I think that's why that's in this part to be addressed. But when it gets into the nuts and bolts of, how people are being used during their planning periods, we also have some of that. If they're being required to cover classes or have a required interruption of a planning period upon the third time, they can submit under current language for compensation, special compensation in our last work we did in the last contract. So I think it's something where we look at the situation, Liz, and if you've got circumstances where people are just totally losing out on their planning for 2 weeks, then we need to take a look at that. Article 20 is where we discuss the coverage of classes and what happens when you have your teachers that are volunteering to cover for one another. We know that's less of an issue, hopefully this year, just due to circumstances. But you guys had proposed, my original proposal was there, and then you guys asked for it to bump up 15 minutes at each one. So I'm definitely in agreement with that. So I struck the areas of the minutes that I had proposed and put in the minutes that you guys had proposed. Then it got down into the different areas we had discussion of, and what you guys have proposed in red, and then we had a response, and then you guys have proposed again what was in yellow. Administrators may be present, but the flow of collaborative plan will continue without input from the administrator. That's unacceptable for us. The whole point of being part of collaborative plan is all of these educators working together to do what's best for kids. And for an administrator as the instructional leader in the building to come in and not be able to provide any input in a collaborative plan seems absolutely ridiculous. I think that just defeats the whole purpose of all of us working together and trying to, provide good lessons for the kids and have a common vision and work within the instructional framework, which is the global vision for the district. So restricting the ability for an administrator to provide input is not something that we would deem acceptable.
May I say then, could we use a different word than input? Because again, this year is different, but in the past, and I know, for example, last year, there were some administrators who came into what was supposed to be a collaborative plan, and they started asking them about data and other information. And so therefore, that whole time was taken up with that instead of the teachers being able to collaborative plan like they were supposed to. And so that's where this statement came in, because of situations like that. Because if it's supposed to be a collaborative plan, then it's supposed to be the planned time where they do instruction, not talking about data or whatever else.
Other issues, yeah. PD.
I mean, it's supposed to be the planned time so that teachers, yes, can plan together.
So the administrator, on the other hand, if they came in and you've got a group of teachers that are planning, but then you've got somebody else that's sitting there doing their own thing and not participating in the collaborative plan, then that means they will be disciplined for not planning. Or I mean, these are the type of things I think getting into a micromanagement of issues that I feel like a majority of the time, these things are very constructive and being handled appropriately by teachers and administrators. I mean, I think that's what's building the unity in our schools. That's driving improvement. So I don't think there's a way to police that through language. And so I understand that you guys don't want an administrator to come in and hijack a productive session of planning and to take time away to, I mean, if someone comes in and they're looking at a collaborative plan and the discussion opens, well, how, and data is part of the conversation. I mean, it seems like that's reasonable. If you have somebody that's coming in and, talking about the school issues of the day, I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. So I'd like for some of the other folks in the room to weigh in on the collaborative planning and kind of paint an accurate picture of how that is going. From either side, anybody?
Well, I mean, I could tell you, I don't necessarily agree with. I think that the data sometimes warrants part of the collaborative plan because it helps us figure out how we need to plan our lessons. And I will tell you, there are times when we send things out to teachers ahead of time to ensure that they're ready so we can discuss and have those targeted discussions about our students and about the data. And then we work together to plan lessons that are going to meet our students' needs. That's all part of the process. So for us to say that, to take out that piece, that's a very important piece there. And I agree with Chad that we're getting down to where I think we shouldn't put that in language because it'll defeat the reason why most schools are moving in the right direction is because everything moves in sequence. That's part of the plan. planning. Data is part of it. So I would say no.
I agree with Sid that, I mean, either question 3 or 4, how do you respond if kids that don't have it? How do you know if they have it? You have to look at your data from your last assessments to determine what your next steps are. So not that principals, I think, should hijack any kind of conversations, but, you know, be there as a support to add input as to what the data may be saying, and to assist in finding resources to address the needs.
And if I may also, as a classroom teacher, I agree also with Sid. We value the collaborative time that we have together, and we value the experience and the insight that our principals can give us. So yeah, I'm with Sid on this one.
So what do you guys feel like an appropriate action is when things are awry or don't go, you know, do reach a point to where, you know, teachers do feel infringed upon? What do you guys feel like the solution to that is when we do have those instances arise?
I'm right now not for sure, but the problem with some things is if you bring in the idea of data and the data chats, then that's more of a PLC idea. That's more of a whole idea. Collaborative plan is planning your lessons so that each teacher, for example, doesn't have to plan for however many courses they have, let's say. So your data chats and a lot of those things should be done on a Wednesday deal or on something else. The collaborative plans that teachers get together and work together, they need to plan their English classes, they need to plan their math classes, they need to plan the lessons per se. We're not talking about data that you're planning for an assessment that's coming up. Or now again, yes, data is in the conversation because you're all going to have a test on chapter 5 in math. Yes, that is still data, that's information. But not everybody's going to have the same data and the same information as a whole. Some of that needs to be a teacher's discretion, that they know that I've got these many students that didn't pass and I'm going to have to do a small group over here with these kids, but yet the rest of them did pass. I mean, that's something that is also teacher also.
Kathy, if I could as well, just to tag along what Kathy just said, in our PLC meetings, that's what that's for. Very often, grade level, subject level at THS anyway, we will invite our administrator who's in charge of our department, say, hey, we're looking at this, you want to join us? And it's an invitation thing because we value their opinion sometimes. But yeah, what Kathy just said, that, yeah, as a teacher, I'm with what Kathy just said.
Go ahead, Liz.
I think as Ms. Newman's been saying, that I think when you're using data in the PLC and you're giving information and getting information from your administrator to facilitate why you're doing what you're doing, so then that way when they're coming in and perhaps you're not exactly where the scope and sequence says should be, those are good things. But I think what happens sometimes in certain schools, and I probably wouldn't see that with the administrators that we have here, but sometimes you have what you would say collaborative plan, which is actually a PLC, or it could be a PD, or it could be a grade level meeting, or it could be a department meeting. I think in some schools, they kind of use things interchangeably, and that's where you run into problems. I think certain schools are very good at making sure that the appropriate thing is at the appropriate time, but I don't know that that's always the case. So having an administrator there to kind of understand why someone's plans are the way they are based on the data, that's a positive thing. It's just, I think that sometimes that might not happen with certain schools. Luckily, that's not an issue with me, but.
And to tag on with what Liz just said, a lot of administrators do try and micromanage teachers, which really, to be perfectly blunt about it, pisses us off. At Tavares High School, that is not an issue. I'm proud to say, thank you, Mr. Stein. We invite our administrators to be a part of what we're doing because we want them to be a part of it. If that's not happening at other schools, then that's a problem. We need to not feel like we're being micromanaged because we are professionals. But just speaking it for Tavares High School, we feel comfortable enough to invite our administrators to come because we want their input. Now, if it's being micromanaged at other schools, that is a problem because then it becomes you have to do this, and then it becomes you're infringing upon that amount of time that is being taken away from your planning. You're being put in the situation where you have to do this instead of you want to do this. So,
Good point.
you know, the have to and the want to. We want to because we have a great program and we do what we do. So I don't know how that would fit into what we need to say here. But, you know, if principals make teachers do this, then they need to be compensated for it if it's breaking into their plan times.
Well, but I mean, part of the issue is I think you've got folks that, just like you guys have a few folks you hear from that where it's not being handled correctly. We've also probably got teachers that are not handling it correctly as a group also. And sometimes administrators have to step in and not necessarily cram it down their throat, but guide the process. Because it's like running behind a bicycle when you're teaching somebody to ride the bike. We got a lot of young teachers, you know, and I think,
exactly.
you know, like Melissa says, you know, you guys as veterans are inviting people in and to come and look at things, but then you've got some younger teachers that, you know, they're not interested in everybody, you know, being in there all the time to help them. Sometimes it's a weird scenario for some.
I get you, but sometimes like we have just one assistant principal and we love him. Trust me, we do love him. He's a little bit of a micromanager. He does a walkthrough and you get a 10-page dissertation on what you did and didn't do. And that's not what walkthroughs are for. And us old timers have to say, no. And the young ones are like, oh my God. We need to have a fine line with the training with administrators too on what these walkthroughs are actually for. And that's why whenever, as a department chair, I always invite our administrators to any kind of, whenever we're collaborating, if we're just meeting at lunch, hey, during lunch, we're going to talk about this next unit. If you want to come by, it's cool. But he's learned, don't micromanage us old timers. But yet us old timers are also facing brand new things, and we need his input on how, you know, best practices to better serve our students. So, you know, it's a fine line we're crossing there.
I just want to be careful that we're not, but the language is kind of the end all be all. And when you're drawing restrictive lines and it's going to impact the majority of the people that are doing it right, rather than directly addressing the people that are doing it wrong, whether they're an administrator or a teacher, then, you know, we don't want to hurt people with what we put in black and white in this room. And I think we've got to be careful of the danger of operating in silos, whether we're planning or a PLC. And you would hope those things, or data meetings, you would hope those things, one, the same blend and work together and help drive the instruction and the learning for the kids.
Exactly.
But at the core of it is you guys planning time does not need to be hijacked and used in ways that are not useful towards planning lessons for kids.
Right, but data meetings are different from collaborative meetings.
Or should
Data
be.
meetings need to be driven by the administrators.
Mm-hmm.
Collaborative meetings, we value their input, but it should not be the end all be all.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Melissa, separating the two out.
So I'll let you guys, ponder on that, and I just don't, we can't have administrators, A, not be able to come into collaborative plan, and B, not be able to provide input. I mean, that just, it's like taking a key part of your team out of the equation. So
We're not saying don't provide input.
well, I'm just talking about based on the proposal. And
Okay.
that's what
Okay.
the discussion needed to kind of clarify. I get, it's hard writing language, you know what I mean? And I know you guys aren't trying to be over restrictive, but you want your time protected and taken care of. So I'm not sure where the language lies that, as you guys provide counter to some of this, then we can see, and I'll continue to think about it. The next one, we talked about teachers giving their plan time, and definitely, we've got in contract where they get their 135 hours of plan, and if that doesn't occur, then it needs to be, addressed immediately. At the end, you guys have just put on, and teachers will have no retaliation for bringing it to LCEA. I'm not willing to put forth the notion of retaliation attached to this. I mean, theoretically, you guys could ask to put that on the end of every paragraph of this whole contract. We know there are mechanisms to handle retaliation. So it seems awkward to tack it on to the end of, if somebody comes to you about planning, for bringing it to LCEA, there's no retaliation. There's no retaliation, period, for anything. And then when it does occur, well, when it does occur, yeah, it absolutely could be. But I feel like there's mechanisms, there's laws, contract language, and policy in place to handle that when it occurs. And we need to handle it, because that's the most egregious, thing that could happen to a teacher, is that they're retaliated against. And I get it. We're not going to be able to stop human nature in any form, but when something is evident and there's evidence that someone has been retaliated against, then we need to handle those things, and that needs to come through employee relations. So that's why I just struck it off the end of that piece of language. But by no circumstances do I want you guys to think that the district does not support teachers if they sense they've been retaliated against.
Chad?
Yes, ma'am.
One innovative thing that we did at our school that kind of made it a little worthwhile, because we were spending an overwhelming amount of time on Wednesday getting ready for the PLC on Thursday, when our administrator said that we could submit what we did for reading. 2 teachers are working on reading, and like Cindy Reardon and myself are working on math. We can submit those plans just as they are. They don't have to go into Excel. No, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 3 o'clock, any of that jazz. We can just submit what we're doing, and that was acceptable. Well, that saves a lot of time. And so to me, that was a good trade-off.
And I think that's what, Terry, that's the philosophy from the academic side of the house at the district level, and what's bled out into the administrators is nobody's, and I hear it from the principals too, nobody's trying to hound anybody to inspect daily lesson plans. But I think that's why it's so valuable that they get to participate with some of the collaborative planning, and talk about, okay, how can we be doing things a little differently? How is this in relation to some of the work we've done in other areas, and that way you don't have somebody that's constantly trying to ding people up for daily lesson plans. I get it. That was it's kind of a mentality of the past, not here but everywhere, is, oh well, let me see those lesson plans, and it was a way to kind of give an I gotcha, to where now as a collaborative unit and you guys be on a plan together, you know, it's more of a global perspective of, are we doing quality planning for quality instruction? And more of a theme and a mentality than just what's happening for one particular hour of the day.
The only piece is some groups are going to move faster than others.
I got you.
Can I go back to the phrase retaliation? Kind of, it bothers me. How do you define retaliation? A teacher who isn't reappointed because we're going in a different direction, nothing defined. I mean, how can you prove retaliation if the person says, I didn't retaliate against them? So, I mean, that's a real, so I'm asking you for how, your definition, how would we be able to prove that?
I can't tell you. How can you prove that somebody did retaliate against somebody? I mean, that's it's vice versa. I was retaliated against. You know, I can tell you, I've seen it through the years. That works in both directions. You know,
Yeah,
I've been a
it does.
lousy employee, so I'm gonna wait until you did something to me one day, and then I'm gonna file retaliation and discrimination law. I see it every day, to be honest with you. I mean, we field these types of things every day, but then we also measure it out to where when it's that's why we investigate it when it's reported to us, and we investigate it thoroughly, because and at the end of the day, if it's unfounded and it can't be proved, then you're limited. I mean, we try and handle it at the lowest level that we can to resolve issues, but chances are if we can't get the proof we need in employee relations when retaliation is alleged, then it's probably not going to get much further in a court of law, because we've turned over every stone that we legally can overturn. So Stuart, I don't have an answer to that. I think you can sense retaliation, and then sometimes it's so blatant that you can call it out and tag it at what it is. But I think a lot of times it is in that gray area.
And especially in the world of annual contract teachers, because new teachers who are under annual contract, it's terrifying that you cannot be reappointed, and the reason given is, I'm going in a different direction. Or, so I mean that's a really terrifying situation if you're trying to put down roots, have a family, move into an area, knowing that if you quote unquote piss off an administrator, you may not have a job the next year.
You can probably
gray area that we need to somehow protect our teachers from that.
Well, other than telling you that I run my other departments at the highest ethical level we possibly can to make sure they are protected when those allegations arise and they're properly investigated. That's what we can do. Language in any amount of language in this contract is not going to provide that shelter of protection. You know, ethical people at the highest administrative levels are what prevent those things from occurring, or at least reduce the ability of it to occur. And I can tell you, other than the very few, maybe the handful of PSC teachers that are in this room, they're the only people in this room that don't live on an annual contract. If I'm not ethical, or if I piss off the wrong person, guess what? I'm not here either, and neither are these principals. So I think, this administration takes a lot of pride in being fair and balanced, and not chopping off heads when the slightest thing occurs at any level. But at the same time,
whoa,
am I all right? But at the same time, it boils down to what's best for kids. And if an individual is not what's best for kids, whether they're an administrator or a teacher, and the availability is there to move on from them, then that's going to occur. And I don't think that's a retaliation thing. I think that's a doing what's best for kids thing. So I don't think, and you read the same things I do, Stuart. It doesn't appear that tenure is going to be something that comes back. If anything, you know, the legislature's intent and the things we get from the state of Florida lean hard still in the other direction.
Well, I do know some of the senators are looking at multi-year contracts being written into law, but that's down the road. We're looking today.
Yeah.
About how many cases are investigated, would you say?
Investigated for retaliation?
Yeah.
You know, that's hard to say. I'd have to look and get data, but it kind of blends, it usually blends into, there's questions of retaliation, you know, whether you're talking about a whistleblower situation or whether you're talking about a discrimination type situation. You know, because a lot of the accusations will come down the road of discrimination, and that's basically, to me, retaliating against somebody for their likeness somehow. So, you know, I can get that on how many cases that we do. It's not something I have right offhand, but that's why we've, you know,
and how many? Okay, how many of just right off the top of your head of the ones you've investigated? How many have proven to be accurate and true that resulted in some sort of discipline against a person doing the retaliation?
I don't have that off the top of my head. And then I'm not even sure I don't know. I can't answer that right now.
Well, I believe it can happen. I mean, I kind of lived the life for a little while, but it was just because I was a union rep. That was the only reason, because I was going by the contract, and they did not want to hear that, the person in charge. But we don't have any problem right now.
I think it's at every level. Some people can handle the authority that comes with being an administrator or principal or a building rep, and then some people mismanage that authority. So I can tell you, just from a district level, we keep a watchful eye, and we take any allegations seriously, and we investigate.
Well, I'm glad to know that. That's really important.
So looking at, you know, learning walks and instructional reviews in the next area, you guys had proposed limiting the district teams of 4 to 3 or more conduct a classroom visit. And then we had a mix of 2 different languages that pretty much said the same thing. So that's what's tagged on the end. So we accept that the reducing the 4 to 3, conducting a classroom visit, and visitors to classrooms will respect the learning environment and minimize any actions that might cause disruption. So, I mean, I think I don't really feel the necessity to belabor rehashing all that completely, but you know, we've talked about the learning walks tirelessly, and
okay.
I definitely, you know, I know this isn't something that's going to go away, and I'm sure it'll be revisited when we get to open book. But this is where we currently stand as we're looking at 1920.
I just want to, just for the record, say that, and I know this doesn't apply to every school, but in our DA schools, sometimes those teams are set by the state, not us.
Yeah.
So just one thing to keep in mind right there.
Gotcha. Where's it at? You guys have proposed not being required to have common board configuration. I don't know. There it is. Down here, that was something that we had discussed before, that it was acceptable. Teachers are not required to follow any recommended common board configurations in their classrooms. That was a long-standing issue, had been grieved in the past, and you know, you're going to have folks that get on board with it, and some of them that have their own way of doing things, and that's not a problem. Then this was just clarifying some things because it was a little muddy on the daily, weekly, and/or alternate basis as requested to the principal during the week prior. Basically, get rid of all the gobbledygook and make it that they're available during the week prior to a lesson to be taught. We had talked about nighttime events. Teachers will not be required to attend evening or weekend activities that are primarily designed as a fundraising event. And you guys had added an event that is not curriculum based. I think you've got, that's, you know, part of what we had talked about is, you know, the nighttime events, whether it be graduation or different things like that, that they might not be curriculum based, but the main thing is requiring people, the intent was not to require people just to come out for, you know, a specific fundraiser, making that mandatory. But if it's an essential thing to helping kids and helping the school, then I don't exactly know what curriculum based. Then I think you're going to find everybody trying to tie some piece of curriculum to something that might not be authentic. You know what I mean? So,
Well, an example might be, I know in the past that there were, especially at high schools, they used the required evening activity to take tickets or to take money at sporting events.
mm-hmm.
And that's definitely not curriculum based per se, but that was more, we need somebody to be a ticket taker at the XYZ game.
Yeah, and I think there's some schools that are trying to wean away from that, but then I think there's some that they need it. And basically there's a lot of teachers that will volunteer to do it, to use it as one of their required ones, but they're getting the release time that goes along with it, because they'd rather have the release time, and especially if they're coming, you know, to some of the events just to support the kids and show the kids their face anyway. So that's really, it's our high schools that, you know, have these large events that need the extra hands in order to pull it off in a way that's quality, is why they have them participate in some of that. The COVID-19, you guys had.
So you're saying that, so you're saying taking tickets and money at a sporting event would count as a required activity?
I'm saying that if that's one of the designated evening or weekend events by a principal, then yes. I know that's the way it's been done past practice here.
I had 4 kids that graduated from Tavares High School, and the parents, teachers, the academic boosters, all they needed us to do.
It broke up. I'm sorry,
Yeah, it
Terry.
broke up, Terry.
No, are you gonna repeat it, Terry? While she's waiting to get back on, I know.
I just said, maybe, can you hear me? I just said that 4 of my kids graduated from Tavares High School, and we had the parents do everything. Academic boosters, athletic boosters, we took care of it all, and the groups intermingled and worked together.
I think.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I think I got the gist of it. I think you were really careful about the handling of money, and we're exploring some things from an athletic perspective also. Just looking at how we're managing, because this year has been interesting as far as events go, and how they're managing now that they don't feel, under current COVID circumstances, comfortable, you know, requiring folks to come out. you know, how are we managing those things? So as we look at that moving forward in the future, what are some other ways we feel like we can cover, you know, is there a certain level of volunteer? Are there some other folks that might be willing to handle it? So
I know at our school, and it's a very small school, so I know if our school can do it, then the larger schools shouldn't have any problems with it at all. But we've made some equitable changes that not only encourage teachers, but encourage support staff, and they get paid. They get paid $20 a night. That might mean two games, but for some of our support staff, they like it because twofold, it gives them some extra money, but two, they get to see the students in a different capacity as well. So as Marlene would say, one team kind of thing. And we started that last year.
And it's probably coming out of either boosters or somewhere like that. So that's what I'm gonna be talking with Mr. Ward, because we've got to think creatively anyway right now. And the as far as because I mean, we have had, you know, just like any other school district, there's been instances where folks that, whether it be a PTO or somebody that is leaning in to help, even though they were approved, you know, wound up in a compromising situation and did some things that were pretty poor judgment with money, and it wound up getting them in some big trouble. But I like the idea of being able to lean on some other folks. You know, a lot of my thought process was going towards, okay, well, how do we, you know, because there are some places that compensate for this when it comes to the non-curricular stuff, that like mainly ball games. And it's like I'm tackling other events in another part of my life in athletics, in that we're looking at some really reduced revenues, and so we're finding that money source right now is pretty wild. But so it's something I'm open to some ideas there, and you know, we're not totally closed-minded on it. I just want to make sure that, you know, a graduation or a report card night, you know, those aren't curricular, but they're something that we need for the function of our schools, and to really build those relationships with parents. But I get the ticket taking thing, and so let me see what we can think about. And if you guys got some proposals that lean, especially in that more specific direction, we can talk some more.
Well, if a high school teacher doesn't feel that graduation is significant, then that's another issue. But it might not be curriculum in nature per se, but that's the finale.
That's the finish line.
You know, and I don't know of any high school teachers that just don't want to be there. So.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know, and it's weird. I know you talk to those high school principals, you know, they want to roll out the red carpet for them on those evenings anyway, because it's a special night for the teachers too. You know, how exciting. It's like, you know, getting to see your kids go to the Super Bowl. So we'll pull on that some more. The COVID-19, I mean, we COVID-19 to death over about 20 hours of bargaining. The main crux of you guys' proposal was like a $500 COVID-19 stipend bonus, and we don't have the source of revenue to do that. So I mean, all the COVID-19 is wrapped up in our MOU that never got landed. So I didn't go dive into that in this. And then lastly, with our current, with our MOU that was signed for speech language, we agreed that we would roll it into contract, so it will become permanent in contract. So I've basically summarized that, and this would just fall under those special compensation areas in Appendix D for differentiated pay. And it mirrors the language that we agreed upon in the MOU. So this was the counter proposal as a whole. I will I'm gonna click send on that so you guys have that.
Thank you.
And I know you guys sent me something over, so I'll hand it to you guys if you've got some stuff to present. And when you just tell me, and I've got the document you guys sent me, and when you guys give me the green light to share that, I can.
Okay. Basically, we know with the legislative money, we've created where our experienced teachers really didn't benefit a lot. A little, but not a lot. And, you know, if you're a tenure teacher and suddenly you're making the same amount of money as a brand new teacher, it doesn't necessarily show our commitment to our teachers for their experience and their longevity for staying with the county. So Kathy and I put together a proposal. I'm going to let Kathy talk about it now. And it's looking at longevity supplements, differentials, and so to reward those teachers who stuck with Lake County through thick and thin, the good times and bad times, and even though the legislature has intentionally slapped them in the face, we as a county should be rewarding and celebrating these teachers. Kathy, you want to go ahead from here?
Sure.
Would you like me to share the document?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me stretch it out. I've learned how to share a portion of my screen. So
Get you back in the classroom. That'd be good.
hey, there's many days. That is a great idea. Can you guys see that well now?
It's good, actually.
Okay.
Basically, it is saying that the teachers who continuously employed through Lake County School and have effective and highly effective evaluations through this supplement because they've been negatively impacted since 2013. And so basically it is a supplement. So teachers employed 25 plus, and then 20 to 24, and 15 to 19. And I mean, we just separated out the few years there to be in between would be eligible for those supplements.
You know, in first glance of this, I definitely I like how you guys have thought through this. Obviously, it would need to be costed out, and I in my mind I could guess and I imagine it's a pretty large number. So I think in theory, I think your board definitely knows exactly what they would like to do. Yeah, we're still, regardless of what we'd like to do though, and what we also have to, you know, lean back on the reality of where we're at. And you know, we had things were looking like they were heading in a lot better direction. So when it comes time that we can't afford to do something, this is prior to costing this out and looking at it. But when it comes time that we can do something for teachers, then it's something we need to do something for them. The tenured ones that have been here, like you said, and put in the years. I don't think you'll get any disagreement from your board, your superintendent, myself, or these principals that, you know, it wasn't the intent to reward those folks with the way they sent out the money for the teacher allocation. If they would have rolled that money into BCA, like you guys lobbied for, like we lobbied for, like superintendents lobbied for.
Like we did for the money last year, exactly.
I mean, we could have done, you know, yeah, so we could have done some really neat things and gotten really creative. And it just, you know, total transparency. I mean, we've got a unique period of time to where the with the waiving of those evaluations from last year and some of the wording they put in their FAUs for how you've got a little freedom on salary increases, you know,
Oh, wait. Can I stop? So,
yeah, go ahead.
just a minute. It's not a salary increase. It's a differential.
Okay.
The base salary, the salary stays the same. A differential
I got you.
discounts towards their FRS, same as a football coach's differential.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that that's their, it's added to their base salary.
So would you say that this is something that you would see?
It's a supplement.
Right. And supplements are usually carried on in multi-years. And I know that will be something that, you know, would obviously have to be negotiated year in, year out based on affordability. To be honest with you, it's very, I look at this and some of those numbers are pretty big and they're very similar to what was going on with the LIFT program whenever I got here. And it wasn't affordable then. And that's what I worry about is I think the concept behind it is great. I think getting it off the ground is what's going to be difficult just due to the financial constraints that we're under. But I will cost it out and we'll take it to the board and let them take a look at it. And we can have further discussion on it. I mean, I get it. I truly do. I'm really worried though. And just the impacts that the spending has had with COVID and all the issues that have gone on, the way they're directing money and really tying strings to it. And then we've got the FRS hike that they put on us that would cost us another $2.5 million. And they're going to hike it again next year because I think they realize they cannot afford to keep the retirement system alive if they do not.
Except it's 90% funded, but it's one of the best funded retirement systems in the nation. But there are legislators who want to water it down. We know that.
Yeah.
But the argument is it's one of the best financed FRS retirement systems in the country.
And I hope we can keep it that way. That's for sure.
So, but I mean, no, if you're waiting for the lottery to be able to pay this, no. Will we have to make some budgetary decisions? Yes. And I think our teachers who have been with us since, if we look at even since 2008, they've lost steps, they've lost raises, 2 out of the last 3 years didn't get anything. So I think it's we as a school system need to step up and show our teachers we truly value what they do for our kids daily.
Well, and I think that's, and the district and the board does appreciate what the teachers are doing daily, but at the same time, we can't print money. And, you know, when they give us $7.2 million, but tell us exactly how we have to spend it, that's not easy. Because it's the same thing with the best and brightest when they gave us that money, but tell us how you got to spend it. They need to put it in the BSA. So we do have some freedom and we can take credit for being able to get that money to the right places. But at the end of the day, when you have a fund balance and you're funded at the level we are in Lake County, I mean, it's easy to sit back and bash us and say we don't care and that's why we're not doing it, which I don't think anybody in their right mind can really think that. But I mean, I get it. Everybody's got their angle that they've got to play. But at the end of the day, it's not because we've got these meaty budgets where people are just kicked back, not doing anything. We're running a pretty tight district, and we run on very tight funding. So I go back to, I agree that I hate it that teachers aren't tenured. I hate it that there are people that miss big steps, but those are things that are out of our control and we're not being funded to where we can where we can, you know, adequately make up for the wrongs of the past. So, but you have my commitment that we'll cost it out. We'll provide you feedback
Let's
on the
cost
cost.
it out.
And
I mean, we do have, you know, our rollover, and so let's cost it out, see where it puts us.
And we can't, this isn't in a silo. Just keep that in mind, that there are impacts to what's going on with enrollment and what's going to happen with FTE this year and what's happening for revenue at the state level. We're going to feel that. So I just don't want to focus on something and us to be made out to be the evil dictators when that is not the case by any stretch of the measure. What I would like to do also, though, when we cost it out, and I'll probably be looking at an executive session sometime in the next 2 weeks, but because I've also got some other bargaining to do. But what I would like to do also is Mr. Ward, have him come in and discuss some of the financial issues that are in our current conditions, so everybody has a good picture of where we're at. True.
Chet, can I interject for a second?
Sure.
I don't think, I know that you're worried about money and money coming in and circumstances have changed, but I think the biggest thing that a lot of teachers are concerned with is that year after year, the school board is not putting in any money for teacher raises. You know, they need some kind of hope every year that there's going to be money set aside, and that's not, they're seeing it year after year not being done.
And I get that, but what we're seeing is no increase in revenue to be able to support increases in reoccurring expenditures such as salaries. So, I mean, it's, everybody's seeing it, they're just seeing it through their own lens. I mean, I respect what you guys see, but also we can't just pull money out of thin air. I think we've got a district that the finances are being managed ethically and honestly and more transparent probably than it's ever been. And I'm being totally honest with you. I mean, if you guys in your heart of hearts feel like we've got all this money or we're occupying it in the wrong directions, I mean, there's mechanisms for impasse and ways for you to call us if we weren't managing things in the right way and that money was available for salary increases. But that's not the case.
So cost it out, and let's look at what it would cost and/or a counter proposal.
What and yes, sir, that's what I will do. From a contract perspective, I mean, I think you've seen the language that I've presented, and along with that it was reiterated, you know, last few times we discussed that I didn't have a compensation proposal. I don't know exactly how we handle the 1920 contract. We can talk more about that next time. At the end of the day, we're full book whenever, regardless of what we do with the 1920 coming back in. And I don't know what that discussion looks like on how exactly we move to that. We've talked about it a few times, but at the end of the day, if I can't afford this and it doesn't go out for ratification, and if it does on you guys' end, it doesn't get approved, we're pretty much in the same place anyway. So I just think we need to be prepared to figure out a way to move forward if we hit stalemate on an additional compensation or language not being acceptable. And I know you guys have the challenge of putting it out and trying to get it ratified, but I feel like a lot of that's going to be, you know, if there's even a shot to get it ratified, it's going to have to be messaged, you know, in a way. So I don't know. I know you guys have talked about it probably extensively with your teams, and I'm open to any ideas, but when you go through and you look at the amount of work that's been done by this group as a whole, has a contract been ratified? No, but you look at all the ways that we've managed to get through that, and whenever money was available to get it to people, whether it's through a SL, with the speech language stipends, whether it's the Best and Brightest money, whether it's the critical shortage areas, whether it's, this new teacher salary allocation money, there's money that's coming out and coming through, but it's not, I know it's not to you guys liking, but I don't know. I know I didn't really appreciate the way how this group has performed on either side, has been, I guess how it's been described, whether it be in a board meeting by you guys or just on the scuttlebutt, because I do value I feel like we spend a lot of time, and trust me, I wish there were a few planes that we could have landed that have not been landed, but messaging is going to be the key. So I don't have anything else to propose today.
I thought, actually, a side question.
Okay.
With the governor opening up phase 3, whatever the heck that means.
Yes, sir.
What does that mean for our schools?
Right now, I can tell you, we sent out messaging, we being the superintendent, that we're staying the course at this time of the practices that we've had in place. I don't know, the way they announce things is kind of peculiar, as we've seen, especially through this whole COVID thing. It seemed like every Friday for a while we were getting some weird change. I really think they were trying to get that revenue pumped up, and it's going to be a risk versus reward, that's for sure. Let's see how it goes, but from a school standpoint at this point, we're staying the course. I can't tell you that won't change if all of a sudden they put some, wonky gun to our head somehow and say, you're going to do this. But so right now, I don't have a change on that until we receive further direction from DOE or from the governor's office.
And then I understand getting hit with surprises on a Friday. I mean, the governor tends to like to do that. But then wasn't it last Friday where there was a thing that any student in virtual who wanted to go back into brick and mortar could do that before the end of the semester? And that was a total surprise by teachers. We had no idea that that was even being thought of until that announcement was made. So now teachers are suddenly getting a bunch of new students in. They're having to go back and do progress reports on students they've never seen. So getting hit by surprises, we understand, but let's keep communication within ourselves open so we know what's going on.
Message received. Gotcha. And at the end of the day, I think you had a really quick turnaround on some of those decisions, and that's probably why they were not made privy right away. So we'll keep the lines of communication open and do a little bit better in that area. At the end of the day, it's trying to keep our doors open and keep things alive within it. It's going to be a rough transition. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to frame it. It's going to be very difficult getting kids back in. They're not going to come in nice packages. It's going to have at some point impacts on class sizes and allocations, and it's not going to be easy. So I will discuss that with the superintendent, and we'll have some more conversations with you guys.
Somebody saying something?
I think just somebody wasn't muted. It's okay. I'll mute the people that aren't muted.
Okay.
I will say about the time you guys find out, it's probably about the time the principals found out. So there's probably people that feel the same way as you do in this room. So I'll just add that. So anything else?
Kathy, team, anything, anybody? Tracy?
I can think of.
All right, then we're good
Thank
for right
you,
now.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And we'll get with you and schedule a time. Let me look at my calendar, and executive session on the calendar is imperative. So let me see where I can fit that in, or where the board can get that in, and then I've got a couple other things that I've got to do with board members, so where I'm monopolizing their time. So we will get with you guys on a date ASAP. Let me look at that a little bit tomorrow. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan, and I'm assembling. Oh, never mind. This is something different. We'll talk later.
Okay. It is 5:16 on September 30th, 2020, and this concludes LCEA and Lake County Schools bargaining.
Thank you.